Hello, in this video I'm going to explain to you section 3 of chapter 11. Section 3 is all about this rule. A times B is equal to 0. This is a rule we're going to use to solve quadratic equations. First, A and B are factors. And why are A and B factors? Well, A and B are factors because they are multiplied by each other. And that's really important. Again, we are multiplying. Usually I will do a small exercise in class and I would like to ask you, give me a value of A and B, so A times B will be 0. So you have to think of a number for A and a number for B, and when you multiply them, the solution is 0. Well, at this point I'm going to give you a few examples. For example, A is 0 and B is 10. Then I will get 0 times 10, that's 0. Or a different example, minus 6 times 0, minus 6 times 0. Well, that's also 0. Or maybe 742 times 0, that's also 0. Or 0 times minus 517, 0 times minus 517, that's also 0. So if you look at this, you will notice that each time when you multiply two numbers and the solution has to be 0, there has to be one of those, A or B, should be 0. Which one doesn't matter. When you multiply two numbers and the solution needs to be 0, you can say that or A or B must be 0. That's a really important rule we're going to use in section 3. And this is a rule we're going to use to solve quadratic equations. So, when an equation is written in this form, A times B is 0, then you know A is 0 or B will be 0. This is a rule we can use to solve quadratic equations. And we're going to show this to you by using a few examples. And this is the first example. Is this equation written in the form A times B is 0? Let us take a good look. When you look at this part of the equation, you see two factors. The first factor is 2a times a plus 6. So indeed, this equation is written in the form A times B is 0. So then I am able to use this rule. When you multiply two factors and the solution is 0, then you know either this part has to be 0 or that part has to be 0. And that's something I'm going to write down. So this is a factor, and maybe this one is 0, so I write down 2a is 0, or this part is 0. So this is what I know. I multiply two factors, the solution is 0, and over here I multiply two factors. The solution is 0. So either 2a needs to be 0, or a plus 6 needs to be 0. And that's what I've written down. And now I have two equations I can solve by using the balance method. And we learned the balance method in chapter 9. Let us look at this one. 2 times a is equal to 0. So when I want to calculate the value of a, I have to do the opposite. 2 times a. So now I'm going to divide by 2. So 0 divided by 2. And the first solution is a is 0. Or it could also be possible that this part is 0. And I'm also going to solve this by using the balance method. I want the variables on one side of the equal sign and the loose numbers on the other side. So this plus 6 has to go. And when I want plus 6 gone, I need to do the opposite. So I do minus 6 on the left side. Then there's only a left, but also on the right side. Then we will get minus 6. So this equation has two solutions. A is 0 or a is minus 6. And now we use this rule to solve an equation. I will give you a second example. What you always do first is you take a good look, is this equation written in the form a times b is 0? So you look for the multiply symbol, and there is one over here. So also this equation is written in the form a times b is 0. So I multiply two factors and the solution is 0. This means that either this part needs to be 0 or that part needs to be 0. And that is what I'm going to write down. X plus 5 needs to be 0 or 2x minus 8 needs to be 0. And then I have two equations I can solve by using the balance method we learned in chapter 9. I'm going to solve the first one. I really would like to know what the value of x is. That means this plus 5 has to go. So I do the opposite, and that's minus 5. I do this on the left side, but also on the right side. So when we do minus 5 on the right side, this is what I find. So this is my first solution to this equation. Now I'm going to solve this part. Again, we use the balance method. I really would like the variables on one side of the equal sign and the loose numbers on the other side. So in this case, I really would like to get rid of this minus 8. Then you do the opposite, and that's plus 8. Then I will get 2x on the left side, and I needed to do plus 8, because then he's gone. But I also need to do it on this part. And then I will find 8. Then, last step, I'm going to calculate the value of x. And this says 2 times x. I'm going to do the opposite, and that's dividing by 2, and I find my second solution. So this equation has two solutions. X can be minus 5 or x can be 4. And you can check if this is done correctly. For example, let us look at x is minus 5. When I fill in x is minus 5 over here, I will get minus 5 plus 5. So when I use x is minus 5, this part is 0. What this part will be really doesn't matter, because 0 times something is always 0. But I can also fill in x is 4. When I fill in x is 4, the first part, 4 plus 5, will be 9. And now I fill in 4 in this part. 2 times 4 is 8. 8 minus 8 is 0. And again, you see, this is also a good solution. So there are two solutions to this equation. X is minus 5 or x is 4. Now we did this by using the rule a times b is 0. Let us look at the last examples. For example, I want to solve this equation. First thing I'm going to look for is this equation in the form a times b? Is this written in the form a times b is 0? And the answer is no, because we have terms. There's no multiplication symbol over here. So at this point, I cannot use this rule. So what I need to do first is factorize, because these equations are not written in the form a times b is 0. Be aware of that. So what do I need to do first? I need to factorize first. Then I'm able to use this rule. So let me put this over here. And we're going to factorize. And this is a binomial. We can factorize this. So Let me write down brackets already, the 0. And then you think of, when you look at those terms, you're going to think about what can I divide both terms by. And that's x. X times something needs to be 2x, so there needs to be an x over here. X times something needs to be 6x, so plus 6. And now it is factorized. And now this equation is in the form a times b is 0, because we multiply over here. So now I can write down, oh, wait a minute, then x should be 0, or x plus 6 needs to be 0. And this one's already done, he's already solved. So x can be 0. Now this one, I need to know what's the value of x. So the plus 6 has to go. So I will do minus 6 on both sides of the equal sign. And this is my second solution. Last example. And this example is also not in the form a times b is 0. So I need to factorize first. So I write down brackets, equal sign 0. And I'm going to look for what can both terms be divided by. 3 can be divided by 3, and minus 21 too. So I'm going to write down 3, but I can also divide by a. Nope, this is not what I wanted. So there should be a. Between brackets, over here should be an a, because 3a times a is 3a squared. 3a times something should be minus 21a. So over here should be minus 7. And now it's factorized. And I can write down, well, then 3a should be 0. Or this part needs to be 0. And then I have two equations I can solve. 3 times a is 0. So a will be 0 divided by 3. And that's 0. Or, over here I need to know what the value of a will be. I have to get rid of minus 7. So we do plus 7 on both sides. And then I will find my second solution. So what's really important is that you always take a good look if your equation is written in the form a times b is 0. When it's not, you need to factorize first. And those were binomials, and you've seen in section 2 how to factorize a binomial. When it's factorized, you can use the rule a times b is 0. Write down what you know, and then solve the two equations. If your equation is already written in this form, you can use this rule immediately.